right, friends, let's put away our phones and close up our laptops. And get ready to take a couple of slides of notes. We're moving into from Great Britain and strengthening those kings in Great Britain into other areas of Europe. And we'll be looking specifically at France, the Germanic tribes, and then Central and Eastern Europe, which is always a weird, different little space. So we finished up with Edward, and we're now going to move into the French kingdoms. And remember these French kingdoms we looked at under Charlemagne. We called it the Franks, which we now know are going to turn into France. And our first real important king under those Frankish Western nobles will be Hugh Capet. And he establishes the Capetian dynasty of French kings. And that line is going to be really direct. In my AP Euro, we're just finishing up the French Revolution and chopping off the head of King Louis XVI, who doesn't get his head chopped off as a king because the nobility has been abolished. He gets his head chopped off as Citizen Capet, which takes his name all the way back to the beginnings of these French kings. Like all of the other places that we have studied so far, those early kings don't really have a lot of power. The power is more held by the dukes and other nobility. And so what these kings, each progressive king is working to do is take away the power from the nobility to assert their own power until we get to Louis XVI, that has the most absolutist power, and then it's going to get his head cut off. But the second guy we're going to look at is Philip II Augustus. And again, I hope for some of you, you remember that name Augustus. That goes all the way back to our first emperor of Rome. And Philip's going to do two things. One, he's going to take land and grow the physical strength of France. He is going to go to war with a lot of different people, and in his making of war will win and conquer both Normandy, Maine, Anjou, and Aquitaine from the English. So this will be what we'll be looking at our 100 Years' War towards the end of our chapter. And Philip II is going to get all of that, and he wins that all from the English. So the English, again, will start to see the size of their kingdom reduce. He also realizes that I need a bureaucracy. I need some kind of way to rule and govern this land. So he's going to set up a French parliament or a French government, except it's going to have a really weird name. It's called the Estates General. First of all, it has nothing to do with estates like buildings, and it has nothing to do with military ranks. That's just the name of it. This will be really different because there's three classes of people that belong to the Estates General. The first class is the clergy. The second is the nobility. And the third class is the townspeople. You are going to be asked that on the test. If you remember that it's alphabetical, clergy, noble, town, CNT. And the townspeople I put as townspeople, but it's everybody else. And what happens and what makes this Estates General ineffective, it doesn't work, is that each one of those groups has one vote. So the clergy makes up about 4% of the population. The nobility make up about 6% of the population, and the townspeople, the other 90%. But each one of those has one vote. And so for ever and ever and ever and ever and ever, until we get almost to the 1800s, nothing is going to ever change for the townspeople because the clergy and the nobility will always stick together and their two votes will go against the one vote. The other important part of this Estates General is that it doesn't just meet regularly. It only meets when the king calls it in order. So if the king doesn't ever call it, it never meets. And there will be hundreds of years in between when the Estates General meets. So not only are you a king, but you're a king that gets to control when your government meets. And that, again, is gives that a lot of power to that king. And here's Philip II. We kind of sort of looked at him a little bit when I was doing the compare and contrast with Edward and the white horse and the military, and Edward looking away from the painter, and Philip coming in looking like the superhero coming to save the day. We see the military, but it's not important for Philip to show his military strength. And so, again, the way that he is depicted really shows a lot about the way he wants to be remembered. Moving into the Germanic states, which is always a weird place, because when we study this part and this time frame, there is not a country called Germany. It doesn't exist yet. Any of you that trace any of your ancestors back to these Germanic states, if your family came prior to 1880, which I bet every single one of you that have any Germanic heritage did, there wasn't a Germany. So you came from very specific spots like Prussia or Bavaria or Pomerania or Bohemia or Holstein. You came from a very specific spot. And again, in this, if you have long, deep roots in Sullivan County, you most assuredly have Germanic heritage. If you have any red coloring in your hair at all, you are Germanic of some kind, some period. So again, these places are really important because they are this middle barrier, and there's like 300 of these Germanic states. We're not going to have a powerful king. We are going to have little small kingdoms, and it is a barrier between very large, powerful France and very large, powerful Russia. So there is not ever a strong monarchy in those Germanic states. Our last look is going to be at Central and Eastern Europe. And Central and Eastern Europe is a very different look as far as when we think about European history. Usually this is a typical, much poorer population. The religion splits a little bit earlier than it does in Western Europe. And there's lots of different ethnicities and languages represented. So we divide them into Western, Eastern, and Southern Slavs. And Slavs are the ethnic background. So Western Slavs are Polish and Bohemian. Anybody Polish? Any Polish people? Polish? Okay. My husband's family is Polish. My mother-in-law's name before she got the name Norris was Shabilsky. So that was a plus, changing that. They are almost always Roman Catholic. So Poles, Czechs, Hungarians. Terre Haute has a huge Czech and Hungarian population. They are Roman Catholic. Our Southern Slavs, these are the Serbs, the Bulgarians, the Greeks, are Eastern Orthodox. Eastern Orthodox is really very similar to Western Orthodox or the Roman Catholic Church. There's just some very, very slight differences. One is the leader of the Roman Catholic Church is the Pope. The leader of the Eastern Orthodox is the Patriarch. They have a different kind of hat. Their belief system is fairly close. I think if a Roman Catholic attended an Eastern Orthodox, they could follow along with everything, but there are some really slight, subtle differences. Eastern Orthodox are have a more prominent of icons or saints. One of the, and I'm not sure in what part of the Mass this happens, but the congregation goes forward. It's probably with communion. The congregation goes forward not only for communion, but also to actually physically kiss the icon of whatever the church is named for. Like, for instance, our Sullivan Catholic Church is St. Mary, so the patron saint of that is Mary. They're all different kinds. St. Peter's is that, but that's a real different one. I think there's an Eastern Orthodox church because of the large population in Terre Haute of Syrians and other Middle Eastern Jordanians that are Eastern Orthodox. Is anybody familiar with that? Eastern Orthodox? It's I can't think of it. It has a saint in front of its name, but I can't think of the name of it off the top of my head. Eastern Slavs, again, are going to follow the Eastern Orthodox Church. And our Eastern Slavs are going to settle into present-day Ukraine and Russia. And Russia will then become an Eastern Orthodox country, and we'll see how that happened in our next slide. Russians move into this area. They're looking for trade. They soon again dominate. The Vikings will be who give the name of the country Russia by calling them Rus. The Vikings find these people very unhygienic and stinky and lots of negatives, and which I think is where that Rus comes from. And that will give us the country that we know now of Russia. And I'll come back to this if you need me to come back with this. So we get our leader, Oleg, who settles in Kiev, which is in modern day Ukraine. And we slowly get this marriage between the Slavs and the Vikings, and we get Russians. And that's why, again, in Russia, there are a lot of blue-eyed, blonde-haired people as a result of the Russians, a result of the Vikings. Russia is a giant country. It is enormous. It's huge. And when Vladimir takes control of Russia, he needs a way to bring his people together. There is no religion in Russia. The Vikings don't bring a religion with them. They don't have a religion. They are pagan. And Vladimir sets out to find a religion so that he can unite these people under one religion. He has no religious beliefs, and he goes to the major centers of all different religions. He goes to Israel to study Judaism. He goes to Rome to study Roman Catholicism, and he heads to Constantinople to look at Eastern Orthodox. What he sees in Constantinople is a very rich city, full of wealth, churches full of gold, and he says, this is what I want. He doesn't study the sacred text or the dogma or the doctrine or the belief systems or the holy parts of any of those accepted religions. He just sees wealth. And he says, this is what I want. And so he moves the Eastern Orthodox Church into Russia. And it will be the religion of Russia and the Russian people until 1917, when the Soviet Union takes control in a revolution. And the Soviet Union is a communist country, which is an atheist belief system. And they wipe out all the church and all the religion and kill priests and take over churches, and people aren't allowed to have any religious belief system from 1917 during the Russian Revolution until the fall of communism in the late 1980s, early 1990s. And eventually the people of Russia today are bringing back their religion very, very slowly, because at least 4 generations have progressed through that time period when the Soviet Union was an atheist religion. All right, so now I'm going to speak to you about our assignment that we have, and I'm going to have to, because last time when I tried to do this, it stopped on me. So I'm going to stop recording.